So everybody, I'm Jessica Einhorn. I'm the Dean of SAIS, and I won't take up the podium for more than a minute. Please sit down. I'm really here just to welcome everybody to this very special event where we have the great pleasure of having parliamentary representative and, of course, former Lebanese Prime Minister Senora and his wife, whom we welcome here at SAIS. Our professor, Camille Pekastan, who has just had renowned reviews from across the faculty at SAIS and is our senior associate professor for Middle East Studies, will actually be doing the formal introductions. So I'm just here to welcome you and to also acknowledge Praveen Krishna, who a professor of economics at SAIS and at Johns Hopkins University, who really took a hand in seeing if we might be able to bring the Prime Minister here today. You know how topical this is. I'm not sure whether the Prime Minister will also speak to us about the wedding of Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, but certainly in the wake of today's, this past week's events, we are indeed fortunate, and I am pleased.
There are two types of statesmen in the Middle East. You have men of power who know what they want done and men of knowledge who know what they're doing. Which is best is yours to decide, but our guest tonight for Senora is not from the military or from the Muhabarat, but a graduate from the prestigious American University of Beirut, from which he obtained an MBA. During the civil war in the late 1970s, he was not with the militias, but served as the Lebanese central bank before joining the business group of Rafik Hariri. Fouad Senora returned to public service as Minister of State for Financial Affairs from 1992 to 1998, under the first government led by Mr. Hariri. This period was dominated by considerable investment in the reconstruction of Beirut and the infrastructure of the country, and by a formidable increase in the public debt of Lebanon, both matters that demanded great skills from a Minister of Finance. Fouad Senora returned as finance minister in 2002 until October 2004 under the second government of Premier Hariri. If that 15-year post-war period was challenging for Lebanon, it pales compared to what followed. Rafik Hariri was killed in February 2005 by a car bomb, which triggered the so-called Cedar Revolution, which forced Syrian troops out of the country and led to domestic political realignment between two coalitions, known as March 8 and March 14. As the leading figure of March 14, Fouad Senora became Prime Minister in July of that year. During those critical 34 months, when he was the head of government, Lebanon endured a brief but devastating war against Israel and an 18-month-long political crisis between the two coalitions, triggered in part by the dispute over the tribunal prosecuting the assassination of Rafik Hariri. The crisis would be resolved by the Doha Agreement of May 2008, after which the premiership passed to Saad Hariri, and earlier this year to Najib Mikati, the March 8 candidate. It is a testament to the value of technocrats in government, and Mikati's profile echoed that of Fouad Senora. Both are talented graduates of the business school of the AUB. If Lebanon has been quiet amidst the tumult of the Arab Spring, it may well be because the country is already 6 years into its revolution, and that it has matured politically, or not, as the brutal events unraveling in Syria may soon have repercussions in Lebanon. This is a question for our guest. Please join me in welcoming Fouad Senora.
Dean Einhorn, dear students and guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for all coming here this evening. And I'd like to thank SAIS and Dean Einhorn for providing this platform for me to speak with you tonight, openly, at times that are truly dramatic and historic in our region. Regimes that ruled for decades collapsed in days, and populations that seemed to live a life of resignation and acceptance revolted in ours. The winds of change that passed through Southeast Asia and Eastern and Central Europe in the 80s and the 90s have now arrived to our region, ending what has been known as the Arab exception. I would like to focus my talk on addressing two questions that lay down the issues as I see them and hopefully open the door for a lively discussion. The first question concerns the forces that are driving the modern history of the Arab states, at least since their independence. These forces were obviously so powerful that they brought down in days the walls of silence and fear that were built, brick by brick, over decades, turning around the situation from populations that were terrified of their rulers to rulers that are terrified of their populations. Yet such forces that were not that evident, since many of us in the East and the West, including the United States, and especially those involved in the region, didn't see these events coming, and coming that quickly and strongly. The second question concerns our responsibility, i.e. those who share common values and believe in responsible democracy and openness, and also what the West, and in particular the United States, can and must do for their own interest in the one hand, and to help the Arab dream of a better, more dignified life turn into a reality and avert the turning of the Arab Spring into a long and harsh winter. I will focus my talk along three angles: political, economic, and cultural, in order to show how the long-perceived stability of the Arab world has been in fact enshrined in myth, limitations, and exaggerations. One, the political angle or the myth of political stability. Arab countries have always portrayed an image of stability. In fact, high-ranked American officials often describe them as such. Regimes at the helm for decades managed through iron fists and emergency laws to navigate the muddy waters of the Middle East, where on one hand the Arab-Israeli conflict cast a constant shadow, provided both a reason and a pretext for many countries to putting off political, economic, and social reforms through the use of the famous pan-Arab slogan, "No voice should be louder than that of the battle against Israel." On the other hand, the threat of Islamist movements looming everywhere in the Arab world and breeding at the various frustrations with the regimes. Between the threats of the Israelis and that of the Islamists, and often both, Arab societies were at large obliged and forced to accept what was presented to them as a fair bargain, i.e., limits on personal and political freedoms in exchange for the stability that is so dear to them as well. The bargain seemed even more appealing when considering recent Arab democracies. In Iraq, a foreign-grown model imposed by force caused the country to descend into an ugly and truly frightening religious and sectarian conflict. And in the West Bank and Gaza, two different governments emerged to run a Palestinian state that has yet to be born. In this context, let me also say a couple of words about Lebanon, my country, and the oldest and for a very long time the only democracy in the Middle East. The country has paid the price of its openness and has been used as a field for settling scores, rather than celebrated as an oasis of diversity. It has paid over the course of 4 decades the price of the struggle between the Americans and the Soviets, the Arabs and the Israelis, the Syrians and the Iraqis, the Americans and the Iranians and the Arabs. All these amounted to a civil war that started in 1975 and during which and so many shocks and assassinations that have aimed at shaking the foundations of the Lebanese state, which remained, in spite of that, steadfast, albeit significantly bruised and weakened. A brief Lebanese spring blossomed in 2005. Indeed, some international observers have argued that the Arab awakening began not in Tunisia this year, but in Lebanon in 2005, when appalled by the assassination of ex-Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, the man credited with the rebuilding of the country after the civil war. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese of all faith and social background gathered in central Beirut to demand the withdrawal of Syria's 20,000 soldiers in the country and to demand the freedom and independence and sovereignty. That was the first ousting of a dictator, Robert Fisk noticed in a recent article in The Independent, albeit from someone else's country. Sadly, the spring of Beirut lasted only briefly. And since then, the reactionary forces have no means to reclaim their position, often through the use of arms in domestic political disputes, and always under the excuse of fighting Israel. This has not only exposed Lebanon again to the seismic, sectarian, and political divisions in the region, but it has also transformed the country from a model of participation and inclusion to paralysis and tension. Now imagine a year ago, a hard-working, average income Arab family gathering around the TV after a long day of work and watching on Arab satellite networks news and images of sectarian conflicts, suicide bombings in mosques and souks, political divisions and bickering, and governments that take months to be formed in Iraq, Lebanon, and Palestine, i.e. the 3 most democratic societies of the Middle East, and in principle the model for other Arab countries to adopt, and then compare all that with the security that you could so once feel on the streets of Damascus, Cairo, or Tunis. Could the choice be more obvious? Wouldn't freedom look like a reasonable price to pay for life itself? What happened then? What really happened? How has the bargain gotten to become unappealing so suddenly, so abruptly? What happened was the accumulation of frustrations from the lack of freedom and justice, combined with the sense of defeat and a strong longing to live a life of dignity and join the train of global progress and development, as well as unmet expectations of economic development, are all factors that caused a straw to break the back of the camel. When Mohammed Bouazizi, a young Tunisian, a street vendor, set himself on fire on December 17 to 10 and set with him what turned out to be paper tigers of stability. An orphan who struggled to support his ailing mother and pay the university tuition of his sister, hoping that she accomplishes an education that eluded him, had his cart of vegetables confiscated after he had gotten a loan of $200 to get it, and then was humiliated by an officer and her aides. When his attempts to see the governor were declined and his dignity reduced, he set himself on fire nearby the governor's office, sparking a wave of demonstrations, first in Tunisia, and then Algeria, then Egypt, later Yemen, before it spread to other countries. Was a mistake on the part of the authorities. A crystal clear mistake in the era of mobile phones, YouTube, Facebook, satellite TV. They opened fire, leading to the explosion of anger accumulated over years and decades from brutal regimes that were at the same time perceived as puppets of the West and incapable of standing up to Israel. Though these regimes tried to build their legitimacy on doing so. My dear friends, almost the exact chain of actions and reactions took place in various countries across the Arab world, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Arabian Gulf. Spontaneous demonstrations expressing anger and frustration at acts that violated basic aspects of human dignity, countered by an immediate and harsh overreaction from the side of the police and security forces, leading to more death and more frustrations, as videos of excessive violence widely circulated on YouTube, leading regimes to claim that a foreign conspiracy, a third party, typically either Israel or Western powers, or even Al-Qaeda, has entered the scene to destabilize their countries and cause a sedition among their people. More frustration and escalation of protests because the people know exactly who shot at them in cold blood. Then a clear message from the leader at the top: it is either preserving the regime or else religious, sectarian, and ethnic chaos. It is either the ruling family and its cronies or chaos and the end. Raises the evident question: what stability? Allow me here to quote the exact words of a brave young Arab who wrote in the New York Times recently, which in fact applies to many countries in the region. He wrote, let me quote in here: "The country has degenerated into chaos and bloodshed so quickly in these past few weeks that I keep thinking, was our stability, our distinguishing characteristic, ever even true? The government tells us that if the regime falls, the country could devolve into sectarian chaos. Perhaps that is so. But what did the ruling party, the leader of our state and society, last 48 years, if that is so?" Unquote. I think it is all simply said here. There goes the myth of stability as it turned out only to mean the stability of the regime. The wall of fear, not just from the ruler, but from an assumed future of chaos in case the regime falls, has collapsed. And this false bargain does not seem that appealing anymore. Dear students, let me turn now to the second angle of my answer, the economic angle and the limitations of the macro reforms. In addition to freedoms at the heart of Arab revolutions, at the heart of Bouazizi's act of revolt lies a fundamental need: jobs. And the quest for decent work that provides a decent and dignified life, and the hope of a better tomorrow. Undergoing a demographic revolution that is set to increase the labor force from 100 million in 2007 to around 160 million by the end of this decade. It is no surprise that the people that answered first Bouaziz's call across the Arab world are the unemployed youth, often the educated ones, and from all regions and social classes. Now, truth to be told, there were many efforts that were undertaken over the last 2 decades in the Arab world to stabilize the macro framework. Through macro reforms, fiscal deficits were brought under control, and so were the current account and inflation. But stabilization did not necessarily mean deep structural reforms that are rendering the market more competitive and therefore more attractive to investment and to the creation of job opportunities. The reasonable growth rates did not trickle down to guarantee more inclusion. They did not widely increase the number of stakeholders, people who have an interest in the stability of the system. I am talking to you this as an ex-banker and an ex-minister of finance, and not only as a politician, when I assert to you that only an equitable growth can be a sustainable growth. The undertaken privatization projects never represented a real liberalization, as they meant the sale of state assets to favored businessmen, without rendering the sold sectors more liberal in the real economic sense of the word, i.e. lower cost and better service. An important point to highlight here is the absence of good governance, the absence of transparency and disclosure, and the role that the perception of corruption plays in generating frustrations that exacerbate further the unmet expectations. No wonder the issues of corruption and the immense wealth of the few that are associated with the regimes were issues at the front line of these revolutions that named by person the centers of the economic power, names that used to be only whispered with fear until very recently. My dear friends, let me turn now to the third angle, the cultural angle, and the exaggeration of cultural particularity. When the Tunisian regime fell and the Egyptian revolt erupted, President Mubarak When the Mubarak regime collapsed, both Colonel Gaddafi and his son announced that Libya is neither Tunisia nor Egypt. Recently, President Assad of Syria also announced confidently that Syria is neither Libya nor Tunisia nor Egypt. Even some Chinese officials have recently some Chinese officials have recently reportedly said that China is not the Middle East. And God knows who will claim next to be different. Well, of course, no two countries are alike. That's three. But increasingly and surely, with the help of technology and social networks, a universal global culture is gathering immense momentum. This is proving to be increasingly relevant in a world that is integrated through a network and in a global village where your friends are pages that know no geographical or cultural boundaries. And in this context, freedom is the new cultural flow, traveling through the Arab world. Now, surely Yemen is not like Syria, and Syria is not like Libya, and Libya is not like Egypt, and Egypt is not like Tunisia. That is true. But also true that in all these countries, the rulers grew older and richer, while their people grew younger and poorer. A generation gap combined with a wealth gap, increasingly separated with the people from who in principle represented them. I have read once that one of the important criteria in American elections is the extent to which the American people identify with a certain candidate. It is no puzzle then why many Americans would make history and elect the junior African American senator from Illinois as their president, someone they could surely identify with as a self-made, technology-savvy and optimist young man. Of course, many Arab leaders, not their sons, which were the presidents in waiting, and surely not in a way that most Arabs identify with. The Arab regimes and the Arab leaders at their head, by widening the gulf of separation with their people, and by tightening further and further the circle of people, and started looking more and more as islands by themselves. How many of you had exactly this feeling when you saw Arab leaders on satellite networks or on YouTube? The feeling of observing islands that have long lost contact with the realities of the motherland. But these were exactly the leaders that the West and the US called moderates, readily classifying Arabs as moderates or non-moderates, based almost solely on the position regarding Israel. This terminology has resonated negatively with the wide Arab society, because moderates have come to be perceived as puppets of the West, which often played directly in the hand of the non-moderates. This is a concept that needs to be shattered completely. We don't have moderates and non-moderates. We have legitimate and non-legitimate. And legitimacy is provided by the people through democratic tools. And this legitimacy will necessarily mean moderation, because as amply proven in Tahrir Square in Cairo, These brave young men and women are not anti-West and anti-US. And they are not particularly advocates of political Islam. They are just young men and women that are eager to have their voices heard, that are eager to participate in the global quest to progress and development, that are eager to live in dignity without being labeled or classified. These brave young men and women deserve much more than a label that is bestowed by the West and by the US based on the recommendation of a lobby somewhere on K Street. As Arab leaders who believe in democracy, our vision and our political discourse need to be crystal clear. Our desire is to adopt the necessary reforms, to embrace the global culture while preserving our characteristics. And in the end of the day, democracy and free elections that guarantee the succession of power will also guarantee the system to self-correct and converge towards more moderation and more openness that does reflect the human nature, and that is, i.e. moderation, both real and sustainable. My dear friends, this is a good time to turn to the second question of my talk. What can the West, and in particular the US, can do now? Allow me also to tackle the answer through three aspects: the economic, the cultural, and the political. I will cover the first two fairly quickly and focus a bit more on the third. At the economic level, it is clear by now that the whole new approach needs to be developed to Western and American financial support to the region. Financial assistance needs to be coupled with mandate that empowers the institutional rather than just the macroeconomic framework, and that empowers the civil society rather than just the civil service, and that tackles openly issues of corruption, governance, and the independence of the judiciary. In a world where no nation is really immune to what is happening in other nations, it's crucial for the West and the US to stop looking at the Middle East as a big barrel of oil supply and start looking at it as a potential partner in global growth and development. It's important for it to stop looking at its people as potential jihadists and start looking at them as neighbors in this global village. Neighbors that are longing to participate and contribute to global progress and development, and to consider any investment in their progress and development as an indirect investment in their own personal progress and development, just like any neighborhood policy would dictate. Culturally, it is important to put a quick end to the worryingly growing Islamophobia in Europe as well as in the United States. I am truly disturbed when I listen late at night to some American TV programs, read certain articles, or look at the latest polls of upcoming French elections. Can anyone explain to me where is the wisdom? Where is the wisdom in behaving as if 1/5 of the world's population, the fastest growing 1/5, is your enemy? Where is the wisdom in reinventing ideological thought patterns, spreading essentialist perceptions, and thus inviting Muslim counterparts to engage in what? In a clash of ignorance? I am not going to lecture about the forum, and I am not the right person to do so. But that is not the point. The reality is that much of what is said about Islam or done in the name of Islam is less religiously motivated than politically driven. Region-specific realities and attitudes are marked by the sense of beleaguered identity. And here, ladies and gentlemen, I will move to the third and most important point regarding the political aspect of Western and American contribution to help support the Arab Spring. Imposing urgently a just and final solution to one of the oldest and deepest remaining problems in the world, and which is in fact somehow connected to all other problems in the Middle East, i.e. the unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I was perplexed by articles by prominent American journalists claiming that the fact that the question of Palestine has hardly come up during the Arab Spring means that Arab youth do not care about Palestinian issue, or at least it is not the central issue in the Arab world as it has always been claimed. I find it truly disappointing, the extent of which many in the West still don't get it. Even many among those who supposedly understand the region and write about it still don't get it. Let me state it as clearly as possible and as comprehensively proven through opinion polls, studies, and cultural and artistic productions that the Palestinian problem remains a central issue, not just for the Middle East. It is also the key to unlocking many of the locks that separates the hearts and minds of Arabs and Muslims around the world from the West. Its solution is an essential hammer to destroy the wall of psychological separation between the East and the West. In addition, an unresolved Palestinian problem is a cause that is hijacked by the extremists, by the fundamentalists, who would not hesitate to use whatever arguments that they have to ride the new wave of democracy and try to capture power in the name of fighting Israel and the West. The statement of the Iranian supreme leader of a new anti-Western Islamic Middle East born out of the Arab Spring does not need any interpretation. This, my friend, would be the beginning of a long and dark Arab winter. And here I would like to say a couple of words about the growing influence that has been exercised by the leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who sneaked into the Arab world and entered Arab societies carrying the Islamic and Palestinian flags, taking advantage of the void created since the 80s by the Egyptian withdrawing and introversion. However, what Iran effectively did was mostly to increase sectarian tensions in Lebanon, Gaza, and Iraq, thus creating troubles in the name of the Palestinian cause, while in the end the main objective is the exploitation of the Islamic Revolution, and to foster the emergence of Iran as a regional nuclear superpower. The irony here is that the leaders of the Islamic Republic attempt to patronize the freedom revolutions of the Arab world when they are brutally putting down and prosecuting any pro-democracy and freedom voices inside Iran, as we have seen during the Green Revolution. Besides, the Islamic Republic of Iran is neither a model of democracy nor of economic progress and development for the emerging democracies of the Arab world. My friends, an unresolved Palestinian problem risks, therefore, throwing an already boiling region into more populism. And populism is a slippery slope towards more polarization and radicalism, as we have clearly witnessed in previous periods of transition in Europe. And this slope will in turn widen further the separation of the East from the values of moderation and openness, leading to a build-up of violence and risk of conflict, a risk that is not just contained to the Middle East, but also spreading beyond, as we saw to the streets of Madrid and Berlin and London and Washington, D.C. and other places. Ladies and gentlemen, the leaks by Al Jazeera of the concessions that were presented by the Palestinian Authority have completely rebutted the Israeli argument that there is no reliable Palestinian partner when it comes to peace. It was also a serious blow to the image of the U.S. as an honest broker peace or provides security for the parties. The first freely conducted poll in Egypt, published recently, should send clear messages to Israel and to the West. Though only 31% of Egyptians feel sympathetic towards the Muslim currents, 54% of Egyptians support cancelling the Camp David peace treaty with Israel. While only 36% supported it, 79% were unsatisfied with the American administration, and 69% said they don't trust President Obama. This is before the latest killing of bin Laden. 69% said they don't trust President Obama, whose speech in Cairo was only a while ago a source of great support in all the Arab world. These polls reflect the problem that the West and Israel face with Arab public opinion, and unless a realization that only a fair and comprehensive peace can be a sustainable peace, then this problem is only going to worsen. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, President Obama said in a speech on Libya recently, and let me quote, "Born as we are, out of revolution, by those who long to be free, we welcome the fact that history is on the move in the Middle East and in North Africa, and that young people are leading the way. Because wherever people long to be free, they will find a friend in the United States. Ultimately, it is that faith, those ideals, that are the true measure of American leadership." Unquote. Principles such as this, my friends, cannot but be universal. And what applies to those people should also apply to the Palestinians, the last people on earth under occupation. I couldn't agree more with President Obama when he says, quote, "We have done so because we know that our own future is safer and with the bright light of freedom and dignity." Unquote. So let me stress one thing last. We urge you, and I mean by you the Western world, to stand up to your own values. It is all Arabs and Muslims who long for freedom and dignity, win our cause. And if we don't win this battle, God help us. God help us all. And I mean all. The elimination recently of bin Laden is a great achievement. It is a great achievement to the United States and to humanity. In addition to the targeted military operation, a diplomatic operation is highly needed. A diplomatic operation is highly needed on the Arab-Israeli front in order to eliminate one of the important pretexts used by the likes of bin Laden, who used the suffering of the Palestinian people as a propaganda. This is an opportunity. Really, it is an opportunity for the US to push forward and from a position of strength towards addressing pertinent issues of the region and ultimately achieve peace and justice. So, my friends, the journey is long. It will not be easy. It is up to us as intellectuals and as officials or whichever influential position we hold to lead the way. To lead the way, searching for the common denominator in our future. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I really thank you very much for your kind attention this evening. I'm really looking forward for a very lively and engaging.
Thank you very much. As a Lebanese statesman, I didn't think you came to Washington for the sights and the food, but you came to us with a very strong message. At least I can tell you came to the right school, because we've been celebrating since January the Arab Spring with great enthusiasm, in halal ways and not so halal ways, but really with great enthusiasm. And our director has done this.
My lecture is that they made a mistake. They opened fire instead of listening and to progressive and effective dialogue. I think that the use of force is not going to help anyway, and of what happened in other countries. As far as we are concerned, let me put it very clearly. We in Lebanon, we are committed to reform. We, and I'm speaking on behalf of my parliamentary group, that we are committed to reform. And we believe that this is essential and important, and it is the only way that can lead. As far as our relations with Syria and our opinion about what's happening in Syria, we are committed to the same principle. We believe that this is the right thing to be done, and the country to engage with them in dialogue. But at the same time, our neighbor is Syria, and we want to maintain the best of relations with our neighbor country, which is Syria. We don't want others to interfere in the affairs of Lebanon. And that is something that we have suffered from a great deal in the previous years. And we want, because we are committed to a principle, why? That no interfering on ourselves, that we don't interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, and particularly Syria. What we can say is that we wish for Syria for themselves. This is the thing that we adopt.
Or to protect civilians in Libya, but to obstruct any Security Council resolution that would end violence against civilians in Syria.
That thing that we put the Libyan model. There was a universal Arab league regarding Libya, that Lebanon of countries, which is the Arab League. So when Lebanon did that, he was doing on behalf of the Arab League, all the 22 countries, and I mean, except Libya. It was really sure. And it was this decision that was made by the Lebanese government on that basis. In the case of that was taken by the Arab League, and that's why Lebanon had to really stay aside. And really, this decision was based on the very fact that there were 15 members, all the 15 members, because actually China and Russia taken that decision.
Mr. Prime Minister, Joseph Jubaili with the Lebanese Information Center. You accurately described some of the, that a victory for Iran, what's happening in the Arab world. So please, can you reassure us about the future of this Arab Spring? Thank you.
Let me start by saying that success has many fathers, and failure has no father at all. It's an orphan, yeah. Let me start by saying that there has been an argument throughout the past decades used by all the Arab regimes in really addressing their problems with their people and so on, directly or indirectly, that you either stay docile and quiet, or the absence of that would mean either chaos or the Islamists or the jihadists, whatever, the fundamentalists and so on. And that's an argument that really gained momentum, and so many people believed in it, and many in the West, they really used that argument. What really happened? We didn't see the Islamists there. What happened in Egypt, we didn't see the Islamists really taking over. So this argument was really disproved by the most recent uprisings. So what I really think is that it is high time to really recognize the call of the people for real freedom, for legitimizing their regimes through democratic process. This is the thing that is really highly needed at the present time. So let's not really try to exaggerate, as I have mentioned. There's a lot of exaggeration in this regard. It doesn't mean that there is no danger in this, but we have to really take the decision. We will stay as we are, and we will count years and years. It is not really acceptable to see regimes perpetuating themselves for years and years, 30 years and 40 years and 28 years, and God knows, and with no real progress as really expected by the people. I don't deny that to modernize these countries, but not to carry on the necessary reform in the political apparatus and in the real freedoms, and to really avoid the heavy hand of the security regimes over there. This is what is really wanted. People, they took the street because they wanted dignity. They lost their pride over all these years. It's high time for them to regain their dignity.
think a nail in the coffin of the Islamist argument was when President Saleh complained that men and women were together asking for him to resign. And nobody cared, and men and women stayed together, and they still want him to resign. I think there was a Nizar.
Nizar Ghanem, thank you for...
Please.
My question to you is, right now in Lebanon we have 134%. 134%, I think, debt to GDP ratio. We have 134, I think. That's what I was reading.
134%? Yes.
Debt to GDP ratio.
Debt to GDP, yes, okay.
And we have about like 52 billion public debt.
Yes.
But at the same time, if we look at the 20 years, we still have electricity cuts. We still have severe problems with our infrastructure. And you were speaking about the economic development, and I think many Lebanese youth are leaving Lebanon because of the economic crisis. So my question is about the economic plan of Harirism, which you were part of.
Yes.
And on the whole government's since the 1990s till now. How would you evaluate that, and how would you see Lebanon and the region? You know, what's the way out economically? And I know you're into that subject.
Yes, thank you. Well, there has been, by the way, recently a new book that was issued about this economic experiment, economic experience of Lebanon since the year 1992 till the year 2009, which is really worth reading, and I will arrange to send you a copy to really look into it. But I mean, for the benefit of everybody. And I'm glad that I have with me now, by accident, a friend of mine and a friend of Lebanon, who is the most widely known expert in the IMF, in the affairs of the Middle East, particularly in the affairs of Lebanon. He is Mr. Abdurrahman. Abdulminam Abdurrahman. Stand up, Abdurrahman. Yes. Yes. And he is the man who has been really following up the Lebanese experience since 1990 up till this present time. I didn't know that he is going to be there, to be here today, but that would be really fine. See, it is very important to really know what happened in Lebanon and what was the situation in Lebanon in 1992 when Hariri government started assuming the authority there. And Lebanon was really indebted at that time. And everything was really on the ground, literally speaking. During all this period, lots of things have been done in order to rebuild back, not only the country, to build back the administration and to really face lots of the problems that really Lebanon suffered from during all this period. Lebanon was not really living in a period of the tranquility during all these years. Lebanon, during these years, from 1992 onwards, has witnessed 4 Israeli invasions, destructive invasions to Lebanon. In 1993, in 1996, in 1999, and in the year 2006. And besides that, I would like to take you figuratively to the year 1992. Do you know what the people were asking for at that time? One single thing. Please arrange for us to get off our homes and get back safely. That's only the question and the thing that they were really asking for. Immediately after we managed to put off the war, then there is a long list and all legitimate and necessary things that were asked by the people over there in order to really build schools, to improve their living conditions, to build hospitals, to build roads, water, electricity, whatever it is, everything of the sort. And at the same time, to improve the level and the standard of living. The minimum wage in 1992 was $54. Now the average income, per capita income, in Lebanon is about $9,000 per capita. It's true that it's not evenly distributed. That's correct. But at the same time, there has been quite a marked improvement in order not only to build the infrastructure, but as well to build the administration, which is again because of numerous, shocks that we were subjected to from the outside and from the inside. Take, for example, the assassination of Rafi Hariri in the year 2005, and what it led to major, let's say, earthquake in the Lebanon, including the closure of the parliament in the year 2006 until the year 2008 for 19 months. It was really closed as a parliament, and more so. What we believe how to deal with the issue. Definitely, there are many thorny issues now what we are suffering from in Lebanon, particularly pertaining to the matter of the International Tribunal and matters pertaining to the right of the government and the state as such to be a monopoly of the right to hold weapons. This is an important aspect in which there is a certain difference among the Lebanese to really how to address these issues. In the meantime, there are certain really address these issues. It is very important to have the new government to be formed, having this mandate of dealing with the immediately needed issues, such as the matters of living standards, matters pertaining to external security, schools, whatever it is, all these issues that are needed by the people, to address these issues and leave the thorny ones until the matter is clarified. Definitely this is an issue that is highly politicized. You have arguments here and there. But what really matters in this regard is to really re-emphasize growth. In the years 2007-2009, in which I was Prime Minister, we managed to have the highest rates of growth in the Lebanon ever attained. Again, you can tell me that this was not coupled with a fair distribution among the people. That's correct. But nevertheless, there is something that has been done in which you are mentioning now that the debt to GDP has been reduced to 134. But I'll tell you, it arrived at the level of 180. And we managed to reduce it to 134. And we managed to have all this progress. Had we had in Lebanon the possibility of real tranquility in the situation, I think much could have been achieved. But otherwise, you see, because of the implications of the problems in the region and the shocks that are being really inflicted on Lebanon in this regard, definitely Lebanon is suffering a great deal.
Mr. Prime Minister, welcome.
Please.
Victor Shaloub, Al-Bayan Daily Newspaper. Mr. Prime Minister, it looks like the formation of the new government is facing a kind of insurmountable obstacle. Are these obstacles domestic, alien, both?
Well, it's, in fact, in summary, it is yes, both. I believe that the Lebanese government, when it was forced to resign, in some sort of a coup that took place. And later on, when certain members of the majority then were lured to really join the other group. In fact, the one who was designated to form the government and those who were behind it, they really underestimated the problems. And besides that, immediately after designating him to form a cabinet, while underestimating the obstacles and the problems, particularly pertaining to the issues that he has to really make a sort of a decision and a position vis-à-vis them, i.e. the International Tribunal. And the International Tribunal, for the benefit of all the attendants in here, is that pertaining to the international, to the crime against Rafiq Hariri, in which a country like Lebanon, over the past 20 years or so, for your benefit to know, Lebanon is a country that has suffered most, and Lebanon lost 2 presidents were assassinated. 3 prime ministers again were assassinated. A number of MPs and ministers and editors of newspapers and leaders of thought and clergy even, all they were killed, and nobody ever could know who really did this crime. Lebanon was turned down to become a country of impunity. So that's why we really insisted on having an international tribunal, not to revenge, but to really stop making this country as a country of impunity. So this is a position to be taken vis-à-vis the international tribunal, and again a position vis-à-vis the position of the state regarding the holding of weapons in the country. These are 2 major issues that any government would have to really state in its statement to the parliament in order to get the vote of confidence on that basis. So they underestimated this situation. Secondly, during that period, the whole landscape in the Arab world has changed. And all these in Libya, in Yemen, elsewhere are taking place. And this is complicating the picture that is making it rather difficult for them to really form a government. This is not to speak about something else which is domestic. What it is, the differences among the new majority. They agreed to put down the previous government. They came back to unite among each other. It turned out there were lots and lots of differences among them. They are not able to agree on how to form a government, what size of the government, what mission it has to really achieve this proposed government. So yes, it is domestic differences, inability to assess the domestic differences among the new majority, inability to assess the difficulties and to make a clear position vis-à-vis the real issues. And at the same time, there are certain changes that have taken place in the Arab landscape that many would really prefer to wait until things get clearer in the Arab world. Please.
Alex Bruce, I'm a student here at SAIS. Thank you for coming here today, Prime Minister. Given Lebanon's asymmetric relationship with Syria and the recent events going on in Syria, I'm wondering if you could discuss what you believe the fall of the fall of the Assad regime, what implications it might have on the Lebanese government and Hezbollah in particular. Thank you.
I cannot really say anything about the fall of the regime, you see. And I have to really leave things that this pertains to the Syrian people. I don't want to really venture any opinion about this matter. What definitely I can really see is that there is a certain level not really feeling at ease at the level of Hezbollah vis-a-vis the situation, what's happening in the region as well as in Syria. This is what I can tell you. Other than that, I think it is left to the people of Syria to decide what they want, you see.
But I think we had sort of addressed this question already.
Yeah.
The gentleman with there. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Steve McInerney with the Project on Middle East Democracy. You mentioned the irony of a repressive state like Iran trying to exploit and embrace, at least superficially, the Arab Spring and the uprisings in the region. And you mentioned that success has many fathers, but not everyone in the region is trying to embrace or pretending to embrace the Arab Spring. I point specifically to Saudi Arabia. I think that Saudi Arabia has barely hidden its displeasure at the uprisings across the region. I think it's clear that they would have preferred to see the Egyptian government fire on its people in Tahrir Square. They were disappointed to see Mubarak overthrown. They've played a very unhelpful role in Bahrain, where they sent troops in to help quell a democratic uprising in Bahrain. And on the first question about the response, the Lebanese response to Libya, you sort of deflected it in that it was a difference in the response from the Arab League as a whole. And I think you could look very much at the difference between the response to Libya and that to Syria as the different positions of the GCC states and Saudi that were very much opposed to Gaddafi in Libya, but in general are not supportive of the kinds of change that you have said that should be embraced and the kind of progress we'd like to see. Could you talk about Saudi's role in the region at this time and how you see them playing a role in obstructing or embracing the kind of progress that you described that you'd like to see across the Arab world?
Well, let me start by saying that I don't represent in here any state or the opinion of any country, you see. I really represent in here my opinion and the opinion of my parliamentary bloc, but I don't represent any state. I said very clearly is that we do believe strongly in the need to reform in the Arab world. And this is something that really is something that is clear that we have taken that position. Now, I explained what is the difference in the position that's taken by the Lebanese government vis-a-vis the case of Libya and the case of Syria, which was well already explained. In the case of Bahrain, I would like to really again here say that we really believe strongly in the need to reform, but at the same time, it is very important to understand the situation of Bahrain in being in a very delicate region and in which there has been a great deal of intervention made by the Iranians in the affairs of the Gulf. So, on the one hand, I made it very clear regarding the commitment towards reform. Is that clear? Yes. On the other hand, one has to really take in consideration the position vis-a-vis the region itself, in which there has been a great deal of intervention. You have to remember that there are still 3 islands in the Gulf that are still occupied by Iran, and these 3 islands belong to the United Arab Emirates. And besides that, there has been lots of intervention that we witnessed. Does this mean that we want to really start let's say, a struggle and a disagreement with Iran? No, We want to really build the best of relations with Iran, but on the basis of mutual respect, in which Iran is a neighbor, is a very large and important neighbor that we have to respect, and there is a long history that brings the Arab world with Iran, but on the basis that no intervention. We don't want to interfere in the affairs of Iran, and at the same time we don't want Iran to interfere in the affairs of the Arab world.
I had promised we would stop at 7 o'clock, and there are so many questions. Do you want to take one last question?
We'll give them 15 minutes extra.
All right, so just a question on this side. So you had...
Yes, thank you. My name is Said Erkat from Al-Quds Daily newspaper. I have two quick questions. On Syria, sir, your political bloc is accused of fomenting unrest and aiding the demonstrators with money and arms. And second, on the Palestinian issue, what are the implications of today's rapprochement between Mr. Abbas and Mr. Mashhad on the peace process and the two-state solution?
Thank you very much for this question.
You regret the 15 minutes now?
Thank you very much. Regarding actually these accusations that our parliamentary bloc is interfering in the affairs of Syria, I think the accusations first appeared on Syrian TV, and they retracted on this. And then later on, it appeared by somebody who really produced certain checks that are supposedly paid to X, Y, and Z, and were used actually in making troubles in Syria. And just a few days later, he came up on TV to say, I'm very sorry that these are falsified checks and it's not true. So all these, I think, are really worthless accusations. It's not true. Our position is very clear. We do not believe in interfering. We don't think that this is helpful, and this is something beyond the future parliamentary bloc abilities. So it is silly to make these accusations. So let's keep this aside. On the other, it's very important what has been done in terms of bringing the two. As long as they stay up in government, was a good thing. It is not being sympathized at by, and I think this is quite wrong. To the contrary, I think this Albert Einstein, and it says you cannot solve your problems with the same thinking that you do. These two articles that are quite important. One was written by Mr. Robert Malley at the Washington Post, and he says in the final statement in his article, there are many implications doing the new politics of the Middle East within the paradigm of old. We risk overlooking the most interesting ones. I think it is very important to look at what really happened as an opportunity. Let me go back to another article that appeared today and written by Thomas Friedman. And this pertains statement about the importance of this to really provide a new opportunity for dealing with the problems that we are facing in the Middle East. Let me read to you what Thomas Friedman has said today. We did our part. We killed bin Laden with a bullet. Now the Arab and Muslim people have a chance to do their part. Kill bin Ladenism with a bullet, that is, with real elections, with real constitutions, real political parties, and real progressive policies. This is the thing that, as I said, we have to think out of the box. We have to think in a new way. It is very important that after what really happened, and from a point of strength to the United States, that to really move quickly, to really try to propose something based on a certain set of parameters that everybody has agreed upon in one way or another, that will lead towards the creation of the Palestinian for getting together. And they themselves, after now agreeing among each other, will have to form a government. And this new government will have to agree to make elections on the one hand, and on the other hand, to start building the Gaza. Because what really happened with all this, what you call